ESPN just released a massive report on the San Francisco 49ers, and I need to tell you everything they said, because this is going to change how you think about this team's future. The analysts at SportsCenter, First Take, Get Up, and NFL Live have all been weighing in on the Robert Saleh departure and the candidates to replace him, and their analysis is absolutely fascinating. They're talking about names that could transform this defense, and some of the things they're saying about Kyle Shanahan's next move are genuinely surprising. So let me set the scene for you. Robert Saleh has officially agreed to become the next head coach of the Tennessee Titans. This news broke, and immediately ESPN went into full coverage mode. Every single one of their shows dedicated significant time to breaking down what this means for San Francisco. And the consensus among their analysts is that while losing Saleh hurts, this 49ers defensive coordinator job is actually one of the most attractive openings in the entire league right now. Hey, what's up everyone? Before we jump in, let me ask you something that takes 1 second. That like button? Hitting it right now helps this channel more than you know. It's how we reach thousands more fans with this content. Just smash that like button real quick. It's the biggest way you can support what we're building here. Every like matters, so hit it now. The ESPN crew started by talking about why this job is so desirable, and they made some really compelling points. First, you get to work alongside Kyle Shanahan, who is widely considered one of the best offensive minds in football. When you're a defensive coordinator working with an elite offensive head coach, your job becomes easier because your offense is going to score points and control the game. You're not going to be put in terrible situations constantly like you would with a bad offense. Second, the 49ers are one of the better run organizations in the NFL. They have stability, they have resources, they have a clear vision for what they want to do. And third, this defense has some absolutely elite pieces coming back next year that any coordinator would love to work with. The ESPN analysts spent a lot of time talking about the players that the next defensive coordinator will inherit, and this is where it gets exciting for 49ers fans. Fred Warner is coming back, and before his ankle injury this year, he was playing like the best linebacker in the entire sport. ESPN pulled up his grades from Pro Football Focus, and the numbers are insane. Overall defensive grade of 93.2, which was first in the entire NFL. Run defense grade of 91.3, which was fourth in the league. Coverage grade of 91.5, which was first among all off-ball linebackers. Those are dominant numbers across the board, and Warner isn't going anywhere. He takes care of his body, he's smart, and linebackers can play at a high level for a long time in this league. Look at Bobby Wagner, who's still getting it done and had over 100 tackles this year. Then you have Nick Bosa, who only played in about 3 games this year before his injury, but was absolutely dominant when healthy. 2 sacks and 10 pressures in those 3 games. A PFF defensive grade of 86.3. We're talking about one of the top edge rushers in the National Football League when he's on the field. Yes, the injury history is concerning. Partially torn ACL in high school, core muscle injury at Ohio State, torn ACL in his other knee in 2020, and now this ACL tear. But when Bosa is healthy, he's a game wrecker. Any defensive coordinator would love to have him. ESPN also talked about Mike Williams, the rookie edge rusher, and this is where the analysis got really interesting. A lot of casual fans might look at his stats and say, he only had 1 sack, what's the big deal? But the ESPN analysts explained that the 49ers didn't bring Williams in primarily to rush the passer. They brought him in to fix their run defense, and the numbers back this up completely. When Mike Williams was healthy from weeks 1 through 9, the 49ers ranked 6th in the entire league in rushing defense EPA. After Williams got hurt from weeks 10 through 18, they dropped from 6th all the way down to 26th. That's a massive drop, and it shows just how important Williams was to that defense. The ESPN crew then shifted to talking about who should replace Saleh, and this is where the debate got heated. They mentioned several candidates and broke down the pros and cons of each one, but there was one name that kept coming up more than any other: Brian Flores. According to the ESPN analysts, Brian Flores is their favorite candidate for this job, and they spent a significant amount of time explaining why. Flores is currently a free agent after his contract with the Minnesota Vikings expired. He's been interviewing for head coaching jobs, including with the Steelers and Ravens, but if he doesn't land one of those positions, the 49ers should be all over him. ESPN pulled up the numbers from Flores' time in Minnesota, and they're incredible. Since 2023, when Flores became the Vikings' defensive coordinator, Minnesota has ranked second in the entire NFL in EPA per play as a defense. Their success rate of 42% ranks fifth in the league. They have been perennially one of the top-performing defenses in football under Flores, and the ESPN analysts believe he could bring that same level of success to San Francisco. What really stood out to me was when ESPN compared the Vikings' defense before and after Flores arrived. The year before Flores became the coordinator, Minnesota ranked 28th in points per game, 16th in EPA per play, and 25th in success rate. Those are bad numbers. Borderline terrible. His first year, they jumped to 14th, 17th, and 13th in those categories. Solid improvement, but nothing crazy. His second year, they exploded to 5th in points per game, 2nd in EPA per play, and 5th in success rate. Then, this past year, even though the Vikings' offense struggled, the defense remained elite. 7th in points per game, 3rd in EPA per play, 6th in success rate. The ESPN analysts called Flores a defensive wizard, and honestly, looking at those numbers, it's hard to argue with that assessment. They talked about how his defensive principles would fit perfectly with what the 49ers value. Aggressive pressure on the quarterback, players rallying to the ball, pre-snap and post-snap confusion for opposing quarterbacks. All of the things that made the 49ers defense great under Saleh. Flores does at an equally high level. But ESPN also mentioned the concerns about Flores. His time as head coach of the Miami Dolphins didn't end well. He severed relationships. His disdain for Tua Tagovailoa became well publicized. He went to Bill Belichick too early in his coaching career, according to some of the analysts. But at the end of the day, was he right about Tua? Perhaps. And regardless of how things ended in Miami, there's no denying his track record as a defensive coordinator. The second candidate ESPN discussed extensively was Jim Schwarz, and they had some fascinating things to say about him. Schwarz has been one of the top defensive minds in football for decades. He was with Bill Belichick as an assistant in Cleveland all the way back in the early 1990s. He had that legendary verbal dispute and chase down of Jim Harbaugh when he was head coach of the Lions, and Harbaugh was coaching the 49ers. He was the defensive coordinator in Philadelphia when they won the Super Bowl in 2017. This is a well-accomplished and well-traveled coach who knows how to win. Here's what really caught my attention, though. ESPN reported that Jim Schwartz's wide 9 defense is what influenced Kyle Shanahan when he became a head coach to run that same defensive scheme. The scheme fit would be perfect. It would be a seamless transition from Saleh to Schwarz, because they run essentially the same defense. A 4-3 base with that wide 9 front. ESPN even played a clip of Shanahan talking about Schwarz from a few years ago. Shanahan said he has a lot of respect for Jim and thinks he's one of the best who does it. He talked about how, when he first started as a coordinator in Houston, back when he was 28 or 29 years old, he went up against Schwarz in Tennessee, and that's where his appreciation for the wide 9 started. Tennessee had Kyle Vanden Bosch, Albert Hainsworth, Jevon Kears, and they were running wide 9s back then. Shanahan said that's why he always wanted wide 9s and why they brought in Chris Kokorek as their defensive line coach. The ESPN analysts pointed out that if you hire Schwarz, you can keep Kokorek as the defensive line coach. The continuity would be there, and Schwartz's track record in Cleveland has been outstanding. Since 2023, the Browns have ranked first in total yards per game, first in first downs given up, and first in third down conversion rate. Those are dominant numbers across every category. They also talked about what Schwarz did with Myles Garrett, who just set the single-season sack record this year. The ESPN crew speculated about what Schwarz could do with Nick Bosa if given the opportunity. Some people have complained that Bosa has been a disappointment since signing his big contract. But the analysts believe that if Bosa stays healthy under Schwarz, those sack numbers are going to go through the roof. Schwarz knows how to maximize edge rushers, and Bosa is exactly the type of player he excels at coaching. The third candidate ESPN discussed was Raheem Morris, and this one has some interesting personal connections. Morris was just fired as head coach of the Atlanta Falcons. Before that, he was the defensive coordinator for the Los Angeles Rams under Sean McVay. And according to ESPN, Kyle Shanahan absolutely loves Raheem Morris. They are very close friends, and Shanahan has spoken extremely highly of Morris in the past. ESPN played a clip of Shanahan talking about Morris, and what he said was pretty remarkable. Shanahan called him one of the best coaches he's ever been with. He talked about working with Morris early in his career in Tampa when he was young. Shanahan said he was trying to get his dad to hire Morris as a defensive coordinator. He mentioned how impressive it was that Morris, who had been on defense his whole career, could come be their receiver coach and do an unbelievable job. Shanahan said he's always tried to get Morris to join him in San Francisco every year. That's a pretty strong endorsement. The ESPN analysts pointed out that when Morris was with the Rams, they won a Super Bowl in 2021 when he took over as DC after Brandon Staley left. That Rams defense was 5th in DVOA and 3rd in sack. They had Aaron Donald and Jalen Ramsey, and they rode that defense to a championship. In 2023, Morris was voted by players as a top 5 defensive coordinator in football. His scheme would fit what the 49ers want to do, and the personal relationship with Shanahan makes this a very realistic possibility. ESPN also discussed the internal candidates, and this is where the analysis got interesting. Gus Bradley is currently the assistant head coach for the 49ers. He's been in the building for a year now, and he has deep roots in this defensive system. The ESPN analysts pointed out that Gus Bradley was the coordinator of the Seattle Seahawks Legion of Boom back in 2012. He was the original architect of that defense that dominated the NFL for years. Robert Saleh was underneath him as a quality control coach back then. One thing the ESPN crew found impressive was that even though the 49ers finished 24th in overall defensive EPA this year, they actually finished 15th in red zone defense. Red zone touchdown percentage allowed was pretty solid. And guess who was in charge of architecting that red zone defense? Gus Bradley. So what the 49ers defense did best this season was being run by Bradley. That has to count for something. The other internal candidate ESPN mentioned was KJ Wright. He's currently the defensive quality control coach for San Francisco. Wright was a longtime NFL linebacker with the Seattle Seahawks, and he played under Robert Saleh. The ESPN analysts believe Wright is destined for great things in this league. He's smart, he knows the game, he relates well to players, but they also expressed some concern about whether it would be too much to ask him to go from quality control to defensive coordinator with no experience as a play caller. ESPN compared this potential promotion to what happened with DeMeco Ryans. When Saleh left after the 2020 season, Shanahan promoted Ryans from linebackers coach to defensive coordinator even though he had no experience calling plays. And that worked out incredibly well. Ryans brought the defense to its highest point in 2022 when they were ranked number 1 in football. He's now the head coach of the Houston Texans. But the ESPN analysts pointed out a key difference. In 2021, when they promoted Ryans, the 49ers had a veteran-heavy defense. There was more room for error because experienced players could cover up potential mistakes from a young coordinator. This defense now is much younger because of the youth movement the 49ers implemented. The analysts questioned whether it would be wise to have a very young coordinator learning on the job with a very young defense at the same time. One really interesting concept ESPN brought up was the idea of Kyle Shanahan finding his Steve Spagnuolo. They talked about how Spagnuolo has been the defensive coordinator for the Kansas City Chiefs after his failed head coaching stint. He no longer wants to go through the head coaching rat race. He just wants to settle down and be a longtime DC for a contending team and win championships that way. The ESPN analysts suggested that Shanahan might benefit from finding a similar type of coach. Someone who has already been a head coach, doesn't want to do it again, and just wants to focus on defense and winning rings. The ESPN crew spent some time discussing the challenges the next defensive coordinator will face, and they were pretty honest about the holes on this roster. The 49ers need more pass rushing help beyond Bosa. They need good linebackers alongside Fred Warner. Nick Martin couldn't even get on the field this year, so who knows if he can be that guy? Cornerback is a concern. The analysts said Ronaldo Green is just an okay player. They were higher on him last year than they are now. Was it a sophomore slump? Maybe, but he played under Robert Saleh and still couldn't hit his stride for much of the year. The safety position is a major need, according to ESPN. The 49ers need a really good coverage safety. If you pair a coverage safety alongside Malik Mustafa, who's more of that downhill run-stopping option, that could be a great pairing. But right now, they have Jair Brown, who struggles in coverage, and Mustafa, who at times can also struggle in coverage. That's a double whammy at the safety position that the next coordinator will have to address. ESPN wrapped up their coverage by saying they'll be watching closely to see how this plays out. They believe the 49ers will find someone good because the job is attractive and there are quality candidates available. Whether it's Flores, Schwarz, Morris, Bradley, or someone else entirely, San Francisco should be able to land a capable coordinator who can keep this defense competitive. What struck me most about ESPN's coverage was how they framed this as an opportunity rather than a crisis. Yes, losing Saleh is tough, but the 49ers knew this was coming. They had contingency plans in place, and the defensive coordinator carousel has actually worked out pretty well for them historically. Saleh to Ryans to Saleh. Even with some missteps like Wilkes and Sorensen in between, they've generally found good coordinators. The ESPN analysts are confident they'll do it again. So what do you think about ESPN's analysis? Who do you want the 49ers to hire as their next defensive coordinator? Do you agree with their assessment that Brian Flores is the best candidate? Or do you think Jim Schwartz's scheme fit makes him the smarter choice? Maybe you want them to promote from within and give Gus Bradley or KJ Wright a shot. Let me know in the comments, because I genuinely want to hear your thoughts on this. And if you found this breakdown helpful, go ahead and drop a like on this video. I'm going to keep monitoring what ESPN and other outlets are saying about the 49ers and bring you any important updates. This is going to be a fascinating offseason for San Francisco, and I want to make sure you're informed about everything that's happening. Until next time, take care of yourselves.